Hi there, I'm Clarence Waldron. Welcome back to Black Muse. Can you believe that Black Music Month is almost over? Time just keeps moving. But tonight, just in time for Black Music Month, we have a very special guest and a very dear friend of mine, Lyndia Johnson. She's the founder of Sterling Voice Coaching. She's a real pro. She knows everything about voice, voice, voice. She's been coaching for more than 25 years. She's in town doing several things, but one that really matters to me, of course, she will present a master's class to our students at the Chicago West Community Music Center, 100 North Central Park Avenue, 12 o'clock on Friday. But that's about it for now. I did tell you, full disclosure, this is a friend of mine, and we're going to have fun. Lyndia, let's get started.
Hi, Clarence. Yes, let's get started. Thank you
Yes,
so much for having me.
yes. So let's start at the top. What brings you to town?
Chicago is like my second home. I'm a Pennsylvania girl, but Chicago's like a second home. I spent 22 years in Chicago and started my company there, went to graduate school there. And really, when I became disillusioned with my career in opera for many reasons, I really started to begin to think about, starting a vocal artist development company, but something a bit more specific and a bit more, I think, targeted towards African American music, gospel, um, pop, R&B, and Black voices. So I always come back to Chicago to offer more information, master classes on what artist development looks like, particularly to communities that don't, have that direct access to the music industry. I'm in Los Angeles, so I work with a lot of artists, and I get to see up close and personal what artist development needs to look like, what actually an artist's path should be, particularly a vocal artist, and all of the additional skills that singers need that I think sometimes fall under the radar when you are in cities that do not have a direct pipeline into the music industry.
Got it. So now for us, the master class that you're going to give to the students, what might you tell them? How might that look? What does
Well, I
that
wear
mean?
several different hats. One of
Oh,
the hats that I wear since 2018 is I am the chair of the very prestigious popular music program at the University of Southern California, USC.
yes.
And I became chair in 2023 after our illustrious chair, Ms. Patrice Rushen, stepped down after 13 years of marvelous service. So now I am chairing what is considered probably one of the most prestigious popular music programs and innovative. When the program started in 2009, there really weren't any universities giving degrees in popular music. They were giving degrees in music, jazz, musical theater, but not in becoming a rock singer or a pop singer or a bass guitarist or a keyboardist, a synth player, a singer-songwriter, not the specific pedagogy that surrounds popular music, which is really new. There isn't a lot of scholarly research on what it is to train popular musicians. There's a lot in classical musicians, in jazz, there's a lot of pedagogy around that, but there's not much around popular musicians, which is why, this is a labor of love for me that I've been, doing for years. So when I come in to master classes with young people, the first thing I try to impart upon them is that there is a scholarly approach to becoming a popular musician, whether you're an instrumentalist or a or a vocalist. There's a process. It's not only the business side of it, but it's also an artistic development side to it as well. And I think a lot of times that gets missed, and it gets missed because the, you know many times educators want to combine classical training with contemporary training, and it's really not the same thing. And there are very few overlaps in how you develop a singer for the contemporary stage and how you develop a singer for the classical stage. And because I coexisted in both, I do understand the differences.
Got
So
it.
young people first, I try to impart that knowledge first. What are your goals and what are you willing to do to reach those goals? Because it looks very different than what American Idol and The Voice portray it to be.
Okay. And I also heard you say there's one thing to be talented, and there's another thing to have skills as a vocalist. Can you elaborate on that?
When I lived in Chicago, Chicago to me, and I've traveled a lot of different countries and a lot of different parts of this globe. And I always tell people, no matter where I'm at, that some of the most naturally gifted singers I've ever heard in my life come out of Chicago. The
Mm,
city is just saturated with just natural musical talent that, is historic in the city, actually. It dates back to, you know, decades and decades of fantastic Chicago artists and blues and jazz, and R&B and pop and hip hop, all coming out of that city over decades. And the singers are legendary to come out of Chicago. There's just a natural musicality, particularly among vocalists in Chicago. And no matter where I go, I haven't seen any city or any country that matches that. However, there is this reliance on that intrinsic natural ability, which also gives a false sense of security about just how talented you are. There's not this drive to actually, peel back layers of this onion and learn how to also develop a level of skill to combine with that natural intrinsic ability. And we demand it among our athletes. We never really, think twice when an athlete, a really talented basketball player or a really talented football player says, hey, I want to coach so that I can study and learn more about, this particular athletic skill that I'm endeavoring in, whether it's tennis. We would never ask a tennis player to go to Wimbledon, never having coached, never having trained. We would never ask a basketball player to go into the NBA, never coached, never trained, or a football player. But yet we ask singers and musicians all the time to just pursue professional careers on just natural talent without any coaching, any training. We ask that a lot of musicians, particularly singers. And that's what I mean by my model for my company is where talent meets skill. I don't make talented singers. I really don't. I'm not a gift giver. I don't give the gift. I think we all are born with a unique gift. And so I don't give that. What I do is I give the ability to understand the gift, how to augment it, how to enhance it, and take and be a good steward over the gift. To not abuse it, particularly for singers, and to understand how to leverage all of the vocal skills that training combined with natural abilities allow you to have towards, a career. So that if you choose to monetize it, you can.
mm, got it. You've done a lot of work with the Grammy Awards, including the Grammy Camp. What is that? What is the Grammy Camp?
Around, I would say almost 20 years ago now,
Oh,
Neil
God.
Portnow, who was I sat on the board in Chicago, the Chicago chapter for the Recording Academy for 2 or 3 terms. I can't remember. But during that time, I was really front and center with a lot of the education initiatives with the Recording Academy. Grammy Camp was a very new concept that the Recording Academy was really just exploring. And Neil Portnow, who was the president of the Recording Academy at the time, reached out to me in Chicago around between 2008 and 2010 and asked if I would begin to lay the groundwork for a vocal curriculum or track within Grammy Camp. Just kind of, what that could look like. And again, we're talking about popular voice. There's no curriculum. At that time, there wasn't a curriculum for what meant to put singers into a 2-week intensive and really pedagogically get the best out of them and also enhance their knowledge about what it is to be a popular vocalist, whether that's rock, pop, no matter the genre, country, what that training looked like. intense training, and again, what that training looked like and how to legitimize it to into the music industry so that you can monetize your skills and talents. So I began, just really developing that curriculum and kind of, realizing it for the camp. And I stayed with the camp, for the first 3 years. The camp is monumental now. It's in 3 cities: New York, Los Angeles, and I believe Nashville. It has, in its 1 week or 2 week period that the camp takes place, some of the best, young artists have come through that camp in the 20 years since its origin. So in its humble beginnings, though, I'm happy to say that I was at the forefront of really trying to build a scholarly approach to how we go about developing vocalists specifically.
Wow. Okay. How would you describe your students? Are they college age? Are they young folks?
Well, because of my relationship at USC, I
Oh,
have,
okay.
yeah, because of my relationship, I have a couple of sections I have a student voice coaching. My company has a lot of deals with K-pop. So I have Korean artists actually in Korea. So I have Korean
Okay.
artists, a large population of K-pop Korean artists. I have a
Mm,
large population of emerging artists. Those are artists that are, really in artist development, either under a production deal or under a songwriting deal with a record company or a label. These are artists that you will be hearing from soon, either through a single or through a full-fledged, EP or album, but they are on the rise, and they're called emerging artists. And then, of course, my exceptionally talented students at USC also generate a certain population. They don't fall under my private company. They just fall under what I do as an educator at USC. And I'm not a career college educator by any stretch of the imagination. I am a career coach in the music industry who was drafted into the college experience. And of course, well-known artists over the years. Over the 25, 30 years, I've probably worked with, at one time or another, a noted artist of some report. And again, that spans genres from rock to country to pop to R&B to gospel. Genre, I'm not a genre specific coach, because I do not believe, I believe that the human voice is an instrument, and what you decide to play is what you decide to play. We don't tell pianists that you must play classical or you must play jazz. The instrument plays whatever it plays, and the voice is
mm.
the same. The voice is the same. So if you are inclined to sing country music and that is your mode of expression, then that's your mode of expression. If you're inclined to sing jazz and that's your mode of expression, my wheelhouse is in contemporary music, or what is categorized as contemporary music. And for definition, that would be anything that falls outside of the realm of opera or classical.
Got it. Got it. Let's go back. You were the first Black professor of voice at the Thornton School of Music.
Yeah,
How did that
yeah.
come about? 'Cause
That
that
was
was your
surprising to me.
talk to me about that. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, Thornton School of Music is probably one of the preeminent, conservatories of music in its 136-year history at USC.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that a program that was building a lot of its vocal curriculum on Black music didn't have a Black coach.
Mm,
They had competent coaches and very talented vocal coaches, but representation is everything, particularly when you're building an entire program on Black music or on the foundation of Black music. And there was no coach of color there to support, these young vocalists who were moving through, whether they were white or, Latino, Asian, or African American. The program was bringing in singers who wanted degrees in contemporary music, non-classical singing, but there was no representation of African Americans when most of the curriculum that they have to learn is built on Black music.
right.
So I was invited which was also something that was pretty unique because USC has a pretty strenuous and rigorous vetting process for all their professors, regardless of what school you're in. School of Music, School of Business, Law, the vetting process is pretty rigorous. But I was invited by my dear friend, Chris Sampson, who was the founder of the Popular Music Program, to come into the program, and he knew about my education, my pedigree, my knowledge, the years that I had been working in the industry prior to coming to USC. And so, my entry into USC was a little different because unlike applying and going through the interview process, I was actually asked to join.
Nice, nice. Now you have a bachelor's and a master's in voice.
Yeah, I have and several certifications in everything. Again, when I was going to college and getting my degrees in music and in voice, there was no pipeline or pathway in any university actually for anything non-classical. So my route was classical music, although I grew up in the African American church. And I always tell people it was gospel music that informed opera for me and not the other way around. Because when I got to conservatory, my voice was I was pretty rigorous in my voice and pretty ambitious in my singing because I grew up in the Black church. And if you know about the Black church, you can't be shy when you're up there and singing, and you and it's unrehearsed. You usually move on the spirit when you're singing in the Black church, and you just kind of get called up to sing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my existence. That was my early training ground. And it was a very valuable training ground for me because when I got into the rigors of a very structured university environment, I was actually surprised that you could actually rehearse. I'm thinking, okay, I never rehearsed in church. They just called you up and you sang.
Right.
That was our experience as people of color. But it was a good training ground for me because it put a lot of fearlessness in me. And even though I learned to appreciate the rehearsal process, I always thought it was, I say, okay, you can either sing or you can't, But as I became cultivated, particularly in classical music, I did begin to understand the need for really structured rehearsals, particularly around classical music. So what it did, though, is gave me another vocabulary. It gave me another vocabulary. And that's, I think, what made me such a unique and continues to make me such a unique vocal coach is that I speak several pedagogical languages.
Okay, now. Okay.
Yeah, and I can sit in the room with, my well-respected Caucasian brothers and sisters and hold center court because I can speak multiple vocal languages.
Right.
On a scholarly level. And not feel as if I am being and to feel as though that is something that I can't hold space for in the presence of Caucasian vocal coaches who probably have a different background or a different upbringing than me. And when I am in scholarly rooms, I'm completing a chapter for Oxford Dictionary on contemporary music, actually.
Whoa, look at you. Okay.
And when I'm in that space, I don't see anyone who looks like me.
I'm sure.
But because I speak multiple musical languages from a pedagogical standpoint, I can sit in those spaces and still have conversations and not feel uncomfortable or not feel less than, because my background in music, my experiences and how I became a musician looks very different than many Europeans.
Okay. So you went to Temple, right?
My undergrad was at Temple University. Yeah. Good old Temple, good old Philadelphia. That was the best undergraduate education I could have received.
Yes.
In the city of Philadelphia, at Temple University. And then I went to Roosevelt University in Chicago. After I finished my undergrad degree. And then after that, I went on to pursue other certifications in other areas. I was very curious. There was nothing left really in education for me in popular music at that time. When I finished, my master's degree in voice, there was really nothing left. And I wanted more information. And there was nothing out there. So I actually, now that's different today.
Mm-hmm.
That's different today. There's a lot more now singers can do for contemporary knowledge about the voice beyond classical. But at the time that I graduated in the mid 90s, there wasn't anything else. So I didn't have any place else to go. So I had to do self-directed study. I had to do a lot of self-directed research. And over the years, universities have asked me, we'll give you an honorary doctorate because of all the research you have just done in this area before this research was even thought of. But it was the only way I could get more information, is to study the anatomy of the voice, study culturally how this shows up in the Black community, how this shows up in the Latino community when they're singing mariachi music, how it shows up in the Chinese opera community, what different things happen in the voice when we are combining it with worship, when we are putting it on a musical theater stage. How does musical theater and pop music now intersect? There was no research. So I had to just kind of go out and do it myself.
Okay.
So I basically probably gotten other degrees that were self-directed.
Right. What does this generation lack that previous generations of singers, always had or knew? Is there a difference in the
Fearlessness. One is fearlessness, but two, previous generations did not have the level of dependency on technology.
Oh, okay.
This generation depends heavily on technology to enhance their vocal abilities.
Do you like that? Is that a good
No,
thing?
no, because that technology really cannot be duplicated live.
Right.
You can duplicate it in the studio.
Sure.
I mean, you can do it in the studio, but once that person gets on stage live, what happens in that studio that was digitally supported and enhanced, if that doesn't show up live, then you are giving basically a false representation of what you actually can do as a singer. So many singers rely heavily on digital enhancement, technology. I don't mind the technology, actually. I think that technology, recording studio technology, is very necessary to memorialize really good music, to get it streamed, to get it over your radio sounding pristine. Mixing and mastering is highly necessary. The dependency that singers have when it's done doesn't negate their responsibility to actually be able to sing. Technology now is at the point now where if you cannot sing a certain dynamic, or if you cannot sing in a certain part of your voice, or if you cannot sing in a certain pitch, all of that can be digitally corrected and enhanced. If you haven't learned how to access a variety of tones and textures and colors in your voice and resonance strategies, all of that can be digitally mastered, mixed, and enhanced, because technology is extraordinarily advanced now, recording technology. And singers rely on that. So when they hear the playback in the studio, they get a false sense of security. I've seen it, thinking, wow, is that me? And I have to look at them and say, no, that's not completely you. Don't get attached to that, because one day you'll have to stand up on a stage at Carnegie, at the Crypto Center, or whatever venue, and you'll have to deliver it with only a live vocal mix that your audio engineer can do, but the rest of it is just you. So do not really, this is a memorialized version of your product that we needed to get done this way so it can be streamed and people can enjoy it in their cars and in their homes. But don't get so attached that it now absolves you from the responsibility of actually singing.
Okay, now.
Aretha didn't have that. The technology wasn't there with Aretha or Stevie or Barbara Streisand. They had to be singers. And there's this security now with singers that when they're in the studio, oh, well, can you just punch me in? Or can we just put a little melodyne here? Or can we just can we just kind of mix this in? And a lot of times if I'm in the studio with them, I say, no, you can sing it. Why don't you just do a couple takes of it until your voice responds? Well, you know why when they can do it, Miss Lyndia? Well, because one day you'll have to sing live in front of people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the jig is up.
And then what? Yeah.
And then what? So I think that's the biggest thing. The other
Mm,
thing is our industry is changing. This generation actually is very fortunate that their reliance on the structure and the business model of the record company um, isn't as I think important today as it was generations ago, because of streaming, because of all of these online platforms that allowed them to put product out and move their music worldwide without the need of a record company. So that record company model is also becoming something that this generation doesn't really lean into as much as previous generations, which means that negotiation, artist contracts, record deals, a lot of that is not as attractive to this generation anymore, as it was a necessity to previous generations.
right, right.
No artist today needs to rely on a record company to move music around the world. It's just not necessary.
Very true, very true. I always ask this question of our guests, who inspired you, Lyndia? Who told you that you would be great? Was it
My mother,
your mother?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, my mother. She was an independent Black woman, single mother, um, part of the Southern migration,
Mm-hmm.
came to the North in the 1950s, part of that migration from the South that many Blacks did. She and my father were married 20 years, but then after that 20 years, the marriage, didn't last. However, there was something in her that really wanted to ensure that there was nothing that we couldn't do. And when she had a young daughter that was musically inclined, and all of my elementary and you know junior high school teachers and high school said to her, your daughter is really musically inclined. That wasn't a door she shut. She didn't lean into, oh, music is wholly, unreliable as a vocation. You won't make money. She didn't really push that narrative to me. She actually encouraged me and said, you can really be great at this if you, really work hard. But I watched her work hard, and I watched her defy the odds, as many of us did of that generation who came north during the migration. And she still inspires me to this day, even though, she has transitioned. She still inspires me. So everything I do, um, that was the example. She still is the example, of motivation, of courage, of self-awareness, of understanding that, is and a deeply God-fearing woman. So she understood that as long as I give my children, a good faith foundation, and be the living example in front of them, you know, that will be enough. And so, I think many African Americans my age and younger, people often ask me, I don't, when I grew up, I didn't know that I was poor.
Okay.
You
Okay.
didn't know, because that generation made sure that you had everything that you needed, and anything else was really something like, okay, do I need that?
Mm.
And
Mm.
then when I grew up and started traveling the world and doing things and started making my own money, I was thinking, okay, I can afford things now that, you know, so yeah, I think I grew up poor. I think I grew up poor, but I never felt that. I
Mhm.
always felt empowered, particularly as a Black opera singer. And she always encouraged that. And her work ethic was just off the charts. And I actually moved through the world like that. People often tell me, do you sleep? Do you rest? Oh my goodness. You're
Mm.
about to change how many time zones, going to what country? I'm actually headed to China, actually,
Oh, okay.
in July, for a C-pop group that's signed to my company. And then Australia after that.
Look at
Um,
you, international, baby.
Yeah, so I moved, and people often ask, how are you doing it? My mother's work ethic was insane. It was
Mm.
insane. And so when that's modeled in front of you, and that's all you know, that sort of shapes elements of who you become.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. How are you celebrating these last few days of Black Music Month?
seeing as many Black concerts as I can here in LA. We got a lot going on. And I got a lot of clients and friends doing shows. So seeing as many Black concerts, gospel concerts as well. A lot of churches are doing Black History Month gospel concerts. So, and I enjoy that so much. I enjoy sitting and just listening to singing. Sometimes it's hard for me to turn off my critical ear, but I do try to just sit there and enjoy. So I'm just seeing as many shows, supporting as many Black concerts as I can, making sure my dollars are working to continue to support, Black artists who are really, whether they're, celebrities or emergings or up and coming, or even again in the Black church. I'm just really just trying to just absorb all of that, particularly before I start traveling.
Right.
And coming to Chicago next week. Yay!
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I'm almost done here. I got to do this before I leave. I want to know about your nephew, Mike. How is he doing? I know
Oh, I
that
have
his
a
dog.
brilliant celebrity photographer nephew. So many people,
Yeah.
and I don't think, I don't think many people make that connection. So many celebrities know him because he's just such a phenomenal photographer globally. But I don't think they made the connection that he's actually my nephew. And one of the reasons why is because we are not that too far apart in age.
Okay.
That's my sister's son, and she's many years older than me. And so he and I kind of grew up almost like siblings.
Right.
But he is doing phenomenally well, just really finishing up images on what he hopes to be a documentary about how the LA fires really impacted the Black community, who
Yeah.
had homes, historic homes here in LA that were, really neighborhoods that were populated by middle class Blacks that, in the 40s were red line districts, that are now, communities that, were passed down generation by generation, homes that are now destroyed because of the LA fire. So he just went through with his camera in those particular communities that were once red line districts, that had Black owned homes in their families for 50, 60, 80, 90 years or more, that are now just completely gone, communities that now have to start from zero. And he didn't feel that those voices were really being well represented. So hopefully this becomes a documentary.
Very good. Very good. Now, say his full name again for people who are listening.
Oh, well, his full name is Dale Michael Letterlough, Letterlough. But I think most people know him as Mike or Mike Letterlough or Michael Letterlough Photography.
Right. Got it. Got it. All right. Anything else you want to share? Our time is about
No,
up.
it's just so wonderful. Thank you for this opportunity, Clarence. It's so wonderful seeing you. I mean, I don't know if your viewers know how long we go back. You go back. I mean, you and I go back over 20, 25 years or more.
At least, because even when I bought my plates here, you came by, and that was early on.
Yeah, that was in maybe the late 90s.
90s. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always a joy to be with you. And when I'm in Chicago, we're going to hopefully meet up and break bread or something. I'm just looking forward to, that time together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, listen, before we close, I want to send a shout out to Howard Sandifer and his wife, Darlene Sandifer. They are the founders of the Chicago West Community Music Center, and this whole podcast is their idea. They said, let's have lively conversation with newsmakers like Lyndia. So here we are.
Howard is being very generous in news.
No.
But Howard is also a dear friend, an old friend, and I believe our relationship goes back over 20 years as well. But I'm always going to be as supportive as much as I can of Chicago West, because what he did and what he is continuing to do is extremely innovative. And again, wasn't something that was around when, years ago when Howard really was, starting Chicago West. It wasn't something that it was so needed, but no one did it. And then he stepped in and made it happen. And 20 some odd years later has turned out, illustrious musicians of all disciplines and all instruments. So I can't wait to go and talk to the kids. I want to really talk to them about USC and, what we have to offer there about the music industry and whatever else comes up.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you very much. For the viewers, click like and subscribe. Click like and subscribe. See you next week.